Hi everyone, as you're getting signed in, please make sure you do a few things. Please make sure that you mute your microphone and then that you are taking a look at your Do Now activity, which is to take a look at that picture and think about what kind of materials you think those structures are made out of. Also, while you're waiting for your classmates to get signed in, please make sure that you sign into your Seesaw account because you will need that for today's activity. Alright, so it looks like our students are all signed in. Taking a look at what you answer for the Do Now, we have some really good ideas. A couple people thought hay for this picture number 1, or grass. That's a really good guess, especially for the roof. Number 2, it looks like we've got clay, soil, sand. Lots of really good guesses. Down here, it looks like we all agreed that this one is snow, so we're going to find out about that to see if we're right. And then we've got 2 guesses for number 4. Could be plastic, could be fabric. The reason that I have you taking a look at these different pictures and thinking about what materials they were used to be built out of was because it is going to be helping us with our engineering design challenge this week. So our job for today is to be able to use the engineering design process to generate a solution to a problem. And in just a second, we are going to be watching a video that's going to give us a little bit of information that is going to help us with that problem that we're going to find out about. So, as we are watching the video, there are 2 things that I want you to think about. The first thing I want you to think about is, why do builders choose certain materials to build with? As you're watching the video, if something pops into your head, feel free to write it in the chat session, and then we will take a look at it after the video. The second question that I want you to think about is, how can we change materials to make them better to build with? Okay, so we're thinking about 2 things: why builders choose materials and how we can improve them to build with. Okay, so while the video is on, if something pops into your head, please write it in the chat session, and then we'll talk about it after the video.
I don't know what ideas you came up with, but there are lots of possibilities. Besides materials like concrete and steel, people have made houses out of all kinds of other materials, like this structure, made of straw, a type of dried grass. Or this one, made of dried mud. Here's a house made of snow and ice. And here's a tent, a simple house made of fabric. But now here's a material you probably wouldn't ever think of building a house with: paper. Paper is great for drawing, but for building? When we think about the properties of paper, it doesn't seem like a great material for building a house out of. Unlike, say, this piece of wood, paper doesn't have the property of being stiff. In fact, it's just the opposite. Paper has the property of being flexible. It's easy to bend and fold. And unlike concrete, paper isn't known for being strong. You'd have a hard time making hard, solid blocks of paper. Again, just the opposite. If anything, paper's known for being easy to crumple. Now, that said, paper does have the property that it can be stacked. But it's not like bricks, which are easy to build things out of. To make a wall out of bricks, you need to lay many rows of them. To make a wall out of paper, you need to stack tons and tons of paper sheets. So it seems like paper doesn't have the right properties for building. But could you somehow change the properties of paper to make it better for building with? Like, take a look at this. It's what's known as origami, paper that's been folded to make a certain shape. This paper bird stands up on its own rather than flopping over. Likewise, the wings of a paper airplane stay stiff and flat when you fly it. Do these examples give you any ideas about how you might change the properties of paper to make it better to build with?
Alright, so we had our 2 questions that we were thinking about. I see that a lot of you already thought about why builders choose certain materials. And in the video, they had 2 ways that they listed, and I think we hit them both. So let me take a look back at the chat session. Yes, so Ashley said that they pick things that are strong. So when we're choosing materials, we want to pick something that is strong to build with, right? So the building or whatever we're creating doesn't collapse. Brandon also said things that are easy to use, right? So they mentioned things that are easy to build with. So we don't want things that are really hard to use to build, because we want to be able to have something that's easy to build with. Sometimes things that are flexible or moldable or bendable make good materials. And I think they used the example of concrete. Okay, I see that we also hit question number 2, which said, how can we change materials to make them better to build with? So this video focused on paper, and a lot of you thought when we saw the origami that we could fold the paper to change it, right? We saw how they created the crane, how they created the paper airplane. Ashley had some really good ideas too of rolling it or bending it, or like we saw with the one example, stacking it, right? So when we made these changes to our materials, we could make a flexible and weak material like paper a little bit stronger by folding it and bending it and rolling it. So keep that in mind as we hear about this week's STEM challenge. Your job this week is that you have just been hired by Creative Builders. As an employee, your first job is to help the business come up with a new building design that is strong and visually appealing. Remember, we talked about things that are visually appealing last week. We said that they're things that look cool. Easy enough, right? The challenge is they want the design to be made completely out of paper. Okay? So that is why it was super important that we were keeping those ideas in our mind, because it's going to help us follow the engineering design process to create our new building design. So, since we are engineers, and since our objective for today is to be able to use the engineering design process to generate a solution to a problem, we are going to work through the engineering design process together. We're going to do 3 steps during class today. Then when you're on your own, you'll have the week to do the create step. And then when we come back next week, we will share and talk about how we can improve our designs. Also, please make sure that you are signed into Seesaw if you have not done so already, because we are going to be using that in just a minute. So, we know that the first step of the engineering design process is to ask what the problem is or what are the constraints. So take a second, think about our design brief and what our problem is that we are trying to solve. Once you have your idea, please make sure that you type it into the chat section so we can talk about it. So I see that we've already got some responses. Ashley said that we need to build a structure that is strong and we can only use paper, right? So you got one of our constraints that it has to be strong, and then Brandon added in that it has to look cool, right? So our job is to create a structure or a building that is strong and that looks cool, that's visually appealing, and we can only use paper. So we're going to be thinking about those strategies that the video showed us to create a strong structure that also looks cool. Okay, so we know our problem. Now that we have an idea of what we're trying to create, we are going to think about some ideas. So in your mind, I want you to think back to the video of what you saw of how they bended, how they folded the paper. Think about what you want your design to look like. So how are you going to make it visually appealing? What are you going to do? Think about how you can make the paper even stronger. Okay, so just think about that for a minute. Once you start to get some ideas flowing, we are going to put those down on paper, okay? So your next step is going to be to plan it out, and this is where Seesaw is going to come in, okay? So in just a second, you're going to have a few minutes to plan out your design on Seesaw. So you're going to open up the plan activity, which you'll find, okay? Let me bring it up on here. You'll have a plan activity in the activity section right under the light bulb. You're going to show me your plan by drawing and labeling it. Once you're done drawing, then you're going to explain your plan to the class. So you can either use text or the voice recorder. Okay, to do this, you're going to click on the green Add a Response button. And then once you are done with your plan, you are going to click on the green check mark to share it with me. Okay, so take a few minutes to think about what you want your plan to look like, and then explain it to the class. Alright, so now that you've had a couple minutes to plan, and I see that most of us have turned in our plans, I'm looking for some volunteers who would like to share their plans with us. So if you would like to share your plan, please make sure that you raise your hand so that way I can show the class that I have your plan. Alright, so I saw Brandon's hand first, so let's take a look. All right, so Brandon said, I'm going to stack 2 folded paper boxes and then put rolled up spikes on it. Okay, so we've got our 2 boxes here that Brandon's going to do. He's going to stack them. He's folded the paper to make it a little bit stronger, and then he's going to create some spikes. That is a really good idea. I like how you folded the paper to create a wider base so it can stand up by itself. And then I see that Ashley's hand was also raised. So let's take a look at her plan. And she recorded. Let's see.
I'm going to roll the paper to make cylinders and then stack them like a pyramid.
All right, so a little bit of different approach. She's going to create something similar to the Eiffel Tower and have kind of that A shape, maybe A for Ashley. And then she's going to do that by rolling the paper. Okay, so as you're thinking about this, you can go back and add to your plan. You do not have to stick with the one that you came up with today. Maybe you got some ideas from those 2 presentations, but once you have your plan, it does not have to be done right now. But once you are certain that you're ready to go with your plan, you are going to move on to the next step, which you're going to do on your own. Okay, so your next step is going to be to use your plan, whenever you're finished with it, to create your paper building. Once you have built this, you'll follow the directions in the create assignment in Seesaw to take a picture, record, or write out how you made your creation. Then you're going to complete the improve activity on Seesaw. So you're going to take a look to evaluate your design and think about things like how we can make it better, what worked well, what didn't work well. You're going to answer some of those questions in Seesaw. Again, you can use a video, you can use the text feature, or you can use the voice recording to respond to those questions. Okay, and then please make sure that you hold on to your project until next class, because when you join in next time, we are going to be sharing our designs with the class so we can give each other some feedback and see what we created. So I'm super excited to see what you make. If you have any questions while you're working, please make sure that you either type them in the comments before we sign off, or you reach out to me on Seesaw or through email if they pop up throughout the week.